Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm here with Rob Lacone, the miserable liberal.
Howdy, howdy.
Hola.
So, in 1996, Bill Clinton passed the Telecommunications Act, or signed. And what did that do? That took the United States used to have 50 giant media companies that would bring you TV shows, they would bring you radio shows, they would bring you movies, they'd bring you newspapers, they'd bring you magazines, bring you all your media, 50 giant media companies. Bill Clinton, and there was a lot of rules that made sure that media companies couldn't buy each other over distribution and broadcast. Why? Because we understand in the United States that it's important to have a lot of different voices in our media, not just one person's idea, right? So if you want to see how that works, watch Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or watch what's the most famous movie, Rosebud? What is that?
Network.
How about watch Network
Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane, right? So you see so one person doesn't have control over the information. An uninformed electorate. You need to have an informed electorate for a healthy democracy, and that's why we like to have lots of voices bringing us news and information and entertainment. So Bill Clinton got rid of that. Got rid of all those rules that said you couldn't own too many TV stations and a newspaper and a radio station in the same market. So it made sure we had a lot of voices that kept everybody honest. Well, Bill Clinton got rid of that. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, Bill Clinton, a good neoliberal, which means corporatist against the people. That's what neoliberal means. You're a corporatist against the people. And so now we have 6 giant companies that bring you everything. 6. They make it, they produce it, they distribute it. 6 companies. That's it. So that's why everybody in mainstream news is friendly to everybody else in mainstream news, because you're going to go work at MSNBC, then you might go to CNN, then you might go to Fox. You might go from Fox, you might go to CBS. You might go over to NBC, which just happened with a couple of Fox people went to NBC and MSNBC. So it's it's only 6 companies. So that's another way to keep people from criticizing media, is there's only 6 places to work. So nobody's going to upset the system. Nobody who's getting paid is going to upset that system. You know what I'm saying? So what's happening now? So now there's a group called Sinclair, right? Very right-wing media group. And they've been doing this thing. You've seen it maybe in print or in online news magazines where they'll have an advertisement that looks like a news article. And it'll say really unbolded, not bolded type advertisement.
Yeah, it's most common in online articles,
right?
Too. They do it online a lot, and it's commonly referred to as sponsored content, which is basically a commercial posing as journalism.
Right.
And there's a small little disclaimer that tells you this is a commercial.
Hey, this was paid, or it'll say paid content.
Paid content, yep.
Paid content. You're like, huh? Why don't they just say, and this is an ad? Oh, because everyone knows what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Paid content. Oh, someone's paying you to put that content in there. That's good. I'm glad someone's paying you, or else we wouldn't have a newspaper. No, that's what they want you to think.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So The Hill, this is from The Hill. FCC proposes a record $13.4 million fine on Sinclair. And what did they do? Well, this is the official wording. The proposed fine comes more than a year after an anonymous tipster told the FCC that Sinclair-owned stations had been airing segments about the Huntsman Cancer Institute without disclosing that the group had been paying for the programming. Now, it seems like it's like a cancer institute. Like, what nefarious things? But the point is, they aired these things that were commercials, and they aired them as if they weren't commercials, as if they were actual news segments. So that's illegal. You can't do that. I don't know what the effects were. It's a goddamn cancer institute.
Yeah, and I personally, I do not know the details about that
Right.
particular institute either. I don't know if they're one of the good ones or if they're like a Susan G. Komen, one of the bad ones that's being predatory. Like, I don't know.
Okay. The FCC found that Huntsman Cancer Foundation, which funds the Cancer Center, had paid Sinclair to produce and distribute segments promoting the research center's work that was, quote, made to look like independently generated news coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you got to be deceptive about doing something for a cancer institute? I have no idea. That's funny, right? That they would be Why would you want to
It's
pull the
very
wool over
weird.
people's eyes out if you're doing a cancer? That doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, this is from Desert News. The ads aired more than 1,700 times in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So there, 1,700 times they post literally a fake news ad thing, a fake news story they put on the TV. Like, not fake because they got it wrong. Fake because it was produced as an advertisement, not as a news piece. That's what we mean. It wasn't there to actually inform you. It was there to push. Anyway, you know what. I don't have to explain anymore. You know what a commercial is. So it aired more than 1,700 times in 2016 across 64 Sinclair-owned TV stations and also for 13 other stations not owned by the company. The fine comes as Sinclair is awaiting FCC approval of its $3.9 billion takeover of Tribune Media, a deal that would give the resulting company access to about 70% of the nation's television audience.
Mm-hmm.
When
It was recent lax regulations or lax protections that enabled them to do that.
So now all the TV stations are going to be owned by, or 70% of all the TV stations in the country are going to be owned by one company.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting even worse.
Yeah, and this isn't their first infraction like this either. I mean, they probably just see this as the cost of doing business. You know, like, hey, why not? We're going to pass this off. They're paying for the content. We're getting a big payday from them. And then if we get caught, we'll just pay the fine. And
Yes,
they're probably still coming out in the green.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Of course they are.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening with your media. And why is it happening? Because of Bill Clinton's neoliberalism. How do we get Trump? Because of neoliberalism. That's how we got Trump. We didn't get Trump because of Jill Stein or the Russians. We got Trump because of 30 years of neoliberalism. People have been voting against the establishment since at least 2008, if not before. They voted for change in 2008. We got no change. We got change on the outside and continuation and continuity on the inside. We got a black guy named Barack Obama with a Muslim name. And on the outside, all kinds of change. On the inside, he continued Bush's war policy, ramped it up, made the banks bigger, made the Bush tax cuts permanent, opened the Arctic to drilling twice, put pipelines all in the country, fracking everywhere. That's what Barack Obama did. Barack Obama wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare. That's Barack Obama. So 30 years of neoliberalism gave you Trump. This is why we have Trump, because of Bill friggin' Clinton doing this. Now we got 6 companies, and what did they do? They all ran empty pictures of Trump's podium instead of Bernie Sanders. Isn't that something? So those 6 companies don't want to hear from a progressive voice on economics. Isn't that weird? But they would rather show an empty podium of Donald Trump, who's now going to do this for them. Including MSNBC did that, by the way. Including MSNBC did that. Showed Donald Trump's empty podium instead of Bernie Sanders. Chris Hayes did it. They all did it. So this is the result of neoliberalism. Now we're going to have one company owning 70% of our TVs. Isn't that so you know how the AM radio is? Now that's how TV is going to be. One point of view. And it's so as Chris Hedges points out, that we are living in a totalitarian state, but we're not living under a despot ruler. We're living under the nameless, faceless corporate state. And we've experienced a corporate coup d'etat in our country. And he describes it as a corporate coup d'etat in slow motion. And so it's not your typical totalitarian regime where there's a guy and he uses the government. It's now the corporate state, which owns our government, which now tells you when you get free speech and when you don't. Now they're doing it with net neutrality. They're talking about this. And they get to tell you who can be on Facebook and who can be on Twitter and who can. So it's a corporate totalitarian state we live in. By the way, we live in a surveillance state. We're being surveilled by 24 hours a day by our government, by the way, private corporations inside our government are doing that. Booz Allen. So this is the result of neoliberalism. This is how you get Trump.
You know, Jimmy, when I was in the classroom And one of the concepts that you would try to teach kids or try to examine and illuminate for them is propaganda. And all the different ways that propaganda we're surrounded by it. And you can see it pretty quickly in commercials, like,
Oh, yeah.
but you don't see what is nefarious about propaganda. And so I would, say that, to reread Animal Farm again and see all the conditions around how you can oppress society by manipulation, by the use of propaganda, and how, the whole concept of, it seems like every American is really working hard right now, and we just constantly are getting screwed even more. So, when I see something like this, that it's just like when I read the news or watch the news, I'm constantly now going, this is an ad. I don't want to read it. Or, you have to they're not making it easy for you to figure out what is news and what's an ad.
Well, yeah, I mean, they don't just blur the lines between journalism and PR. They just eliminate it entirely by trying to pass it off as one and the same.
And I just want, when you started this article, I was also thinking really quickly about the idea when we watch programs or we watch a commercial and it's about a car and you see the small print at the bottom of the ad. Right? And it's like, we're so now accustomed to that must be acceptable, that you can make things super, super small, that you don't have to acknowledge.
Well, I never understood what the point of that was. No one's reading that. So
how is it a disclaimer?
That's some kind of legal disclaimer that they have to put there, but no one can read that. It's not on the screen long enough to read. So, I mean, I get until they write into the regulations, hey, your disclaimer has to be large enough to read and on screen long enough to read. But they're not going to do that because guess what? Your government's owned by the corporation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. Bankers don't want you to do that, and the car companies don't want you to do that. And our car companies, by the way, don't have to be profitable. If they crash, our government will socialize them, bail them out. I mean, not socialize them, I'm sorry. We'll give that same failed capitalists billions of dollars and prop up artificially their industry, which is what we do. So there you go. This is the effect of neoliberalism, just so you know. That's why we got Trump, just so you know. That's why right-wing radio is the way it is. That's why there's no left-wing talk, even in Los Angeles. A lefty city like Los Angeles, there's no lefty talk on the radio. Nowhere.
Yeah. Well, that's something else. Like Chris Hedges mentions that in, I think it's Death of the Liberal Class, where he mentions it, where he's just like, yeah, do you really expect anything to go against the status quo when your news media is owned by corporations benefiting the most from the status quo?
Yes.
So this idea, MSNBC is the progressive. No, they're not. They never really were. They've gotten even worse, but they never really were. Because it's all still corporate. It's the corporate media.
And I've said a million times, as soon as Rachel Maddow says anything that costs MSNBC or Comcast a nickel, they will fire her. Just like they fired Phil Donahue, who had the highest rated show on the network when they fired him because he was against the war. They were owned by General Electric, which are war profiteers. And they were like, hey, this hurts our profits. Get that guy out of here. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Ed Schultz. They're owned by Comcast. Ed Schultz wanted to tell the truth about the TPP. Comcast wanted the TPP. They got rid of Ed Schultz. Rachel Maddow didn't say a word. Chris Hayes didn't say a word. So that's all you need to know about those two people, that they're willing to sell out you and their own integrity for cash, $30,000 a day. And so am I. I'm not better than them. No one's offered. So in the meantime, I get to tell you the truth about them. And it's obvious that they're sellout, horrible lackeys. Unbelievable. Rachel Maddow is a propagandist of the highest order, to the point where most people now just go, I can't believe that you don't agree that there's Russian hacked our election. They just say that. They just don't go, here's the evidence. They never say, here's the evidence. They just go, I can't believe you don't think.
The evidence is, come on, Jimmy.
The evidence is, come on.
Jimmy, I was listening to NPR this morning, and they talked about Russia, and they said, well, the intel hasn't really come out with any evidence yet, but what? But what?
It's only
come on.
But come on.
Is that the counterpoint? But
yes.
Come on.
So
here's
again,
a message from the Koch brothers.
The lefties. Here's the lefties, the lefty news, and everybody on the left. The ball's on the 1 yard line. The Republicans couldn't be more unpopular in Congress. They're passing the most unpopular legislation in the history of our country. They got the most unpopular president in the history of our country. And the Democrats have the ball on the 1 yard line. And what are they talking about? They're talking about Russia. That's the equivalent of having the ball on the 1 yard line and fumbling it backwards 10 yards every time you try to do something. And that's what the Democrats are doing. Instead of hammering the Trump on their agenda, hammering him about single payer. Like, imagine in 2000, look how so this is the Republicans cramming every shitty piece of legislation down their throats while they have the chance to do it. If Barack Obama would have given us a public option in 2008, if he would have crammed that down our throats, a public option, Republicans would be, they have no ideology left then. Oh, what? It turns out that this works? This government program works? Yeah. He didn't do that. He could have changed everything in the United States, Barack Obama. He could have proved that government worked for people. He could have proved government health care. He didn't do any of that. And this is the result. And look how they do this. Imagine if Barack Obama, instead of jamming down 2 times opening the Arctic to drilling, instead of jamming down the Bush tax cuts that made it, instead of jamming down making the banks bigger, instead of jamming down our throat, he should have jammed the opposite. He should have broke up the banks, ended the wars, gave everybody free college and a public option, just like they're jamming shit down. But the Democrats don't do that. Why? Because Barack Obama was owned by the same goddamn people. Do I have to show you Dylan Ratigan again explaining that to you? I don't have to do that, do I? Because I'll show it to you, Dylan Ratigan explaining that if you think Trump is corrupt, you have to believe that Barack Obama took bribes from the financial industry, from Wall Street, and from the medical industry and Big Pharma to make sure we don't have a functioning healthcare system or a functioning financial system. That's what Dylan Ratigan, award-winning journalist, says. And that's what we're left with. This is the end. So the Democrats will never do this. They'll never jam because they're picked to do the other thing. Barack Obama did a right-wing thing and he painted it as a left-wing thing. The Obamacare. That's a right-wing thing he did. So this is the natural progression. This is the natural result of 30 years of neoliberalism. You get Trump, you get a corporate takeover complete of your government, which it was before anyway. It's depressing. It really is. And still, they're talking about Russia. And that's all they're going to talk about. Russia, Russia, Russia. You got the leading Democrats talking about Russia. Tom Perez talking about Russia. Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes talking about fucking Russia. No kidding. Ball's on the 1-yard line. Oh, my corporate overlords don't want me to run it through. Oh, okay, I won't. I'm going to do a Statue of Liberty play from the 1-yard line, and we're going to fumble it backwards. And that's what they're doing.
We're doing a Hail Mary. I don't know if that's a good idea. Come on, Ron. Come on.
And it just makes me laugh that people think people like Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow have any integrity. Even Kyle Kalinske called out Chris Hayes yesterday on Twitter.
Nice.
He said, "You used to be great at your job. You're mediocre at best." No, that's what Kyle Kalinske said about Chris Hayes. And Chris Hayes does not give a shit what we think of him. Couldn't care less what we think of him. He hangs out with rich people. Chris Hayes hangs out with the rich of the rich of the rich. That's who Chris Hayes hangs out with. And then he takes I'm going to guess a limo or into MSNBC every day. Doesn't get out to talk to anybody ever. And then he goes up to his, he has assistants and people. He has drivers and assistants and interns and everybody to take care of every fucking need he has. Boy, I am jealous of him. I am jealous. And they're not giving you the news. They're giving you corporate propaganda. As soon as Chris Hayes tells the truth about a war, he will be fired. As soon as Rachel tells you the truth about Russia, she will be fired, which is why she's continuing to do propaganda, especially about the dossier, which was already debunked in her face on her show by Richard Engel. Anyway, this is clips getting too long. I get it dovetailing into too many pieces of shit. This is it. This is what it's about. That's the end of neoliberalism. Keep voting for the lesser of two evil and see how much better that works out for you. Please make sure you subscribe, right? Because even if you think you're subscribed, I'm not kidding. They're unsubscribing people. People are telling us they got unsubscribed 3 times in one day. So please make sure you subscribe. Click that bell that gives you a notice when we drop a video. And if you can help support the show by becoming a patron or through PayPal, there's lots of different ways to help support the show. Or you can come to our live show February 16th. That's a Friday night in Burbank, California. There's links for everything right there. We'll see you then.